Larson, who is the think tank, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific. He is a boat officer, admiral's barge. Along with him is Mr. Glaubitz, Mr. Gerald Glaubitz, and Mrs. Jean Glaubitz. He is the president of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, arriving there just after having left Mary Point Pier, which was an interestingly called Mary Point Pier because large warships and aircraft carriers were too big to tie up there. So the sailors were merry to get off. They often called it the drunken, brawling roll in the dirt pier. He'll be moving past these 8 side boys, as they are called. An unusual name, but he's passing through an honor cordon. It is a centuries-old tradition taken from the British. They are junior members of the ship's crew who salute a visiting guest on behalf of the crew itself. The number of the side boys is directly related to the rank of the dignitary or visitor. The higher the rank, of course, the larger the number. 8 is the maximum that can ever be given. Ken Kashiwahara, our correspondent, is standing by. Ken, set the scene for us. What will we be experiencing as we enjoy the commemoration ceremony?
It was designed, I think the centerpiece of this whole ceremony is the Arizona Memorial, and the architect designed it to evoke a sense of serenity. You'll notice that the roof of the memorial sags in the center and it rises up to the sky on either side. And people think that means that that represents the defeat here at Pearl Harbor and the ultimate victory of the United States. There's a history behind that memorial. It wasn't easy to build. There was not a lot of sentiment after the war to have a memorial here. And the first bill was introduced in Congress in 1950, and it wasn't until 1958 that Congress finally passed a bill authorizing this memorial, and President Eisenhower signed it. But the fundraising effort was very difficult in the private sector because people didn't really want to remember this anymore. And it wasn't until Ralph Edwards, who had a television show then called This Is Your Life, made a special appeal on television here at Pearl Harbor. And in 1961, Elvis Presley gave a benefit concert for the Arizona Memorial that they were finally able to raise the $500,000 necessary to build this memorial, and there it stands today.
The President and Mrs. Bush are moving to a holding room where they will remain for a brief period of time before they pass along to the ceremony. Of course, he is meeting dignitaries at this point. Interestingly, as Ken was telling us about the memorial itself, it does not actually touch the battleship Arizona. It sits astride the Arizona, and if you look out to the sea, we have been able to see it a bit through the day. Gun turret number 3, because of low tide, is actually visible. President and Mrs. Bush with Admiral Larson. I am told the President will not be moving toward the holding room, but moving directly toward the ceremony, which is about to begin.
President and Mrs. Bush, ladies and gentlemen, the invocation will be offered by Rear Admiral David E. White, Chief of Chaplains, United States Navy. Would you please rise? Let us pray. Almighty God, author of life and liberty, we ask your blessing as in this hallowed place we honor all those who 50 years ago today stood fast in the defense of freedom. We pray particularly, O God, that as the mystic cords of memory stretch forth from sunken decks beneath the sea, they may touch our hearts with that sense of national sacrifice symbolized and remembered on this day in history. On this special occasion, we lift up all those men and women, past and present, who have accepted the obligations of their forebears' heritage, and we offer our profound gratitude for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved and mercy more than life. Therefore endow us, O God, with that spirit which prizes liberty as the heritage of all humanity, that we may resolve to sustain that pride which belongs to those who laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. Amen. Please be seated. The design of this memorial helps us remember Pearl Harbor's place in our nation's history. The raised entrance on that side represents the strength of the United States before the attack. The low point in the center signifies our losses here on December 7th. The low point of our defense, but the starting point on the road to victory. The rise in this end of the memorial represents our return to strength and security with our victory in World War II, as well as our status as a leader in the community of nations. The 7 windows on each side of the center span and the 7 windows across the top represent an eternal 21-gun salute. And the vertical divisions between the windows are symbolic of Marines standing perpetual guard over their compatriots, our compatriots, still at their posts below. It is written, "Greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." In memory of those who laid down their lives for us here at Pearl Harbor, we will observe a minute of silence at 7:55 a.m., the time that the attack began. And that minute will be marked by the whistle of the USS Chosin. Now, following that minute of silence, aircraft from the Hawaii Air National Guard will memorialize our fallen comrades by a flyover in the missing man formation. And I should say that as they do fly over, and I'll give you a little notice before they get here, they will be coming from the rear here. They will be low and they will be noisy, so I'll make sure that we don't get caught by surprise here. So we will be waiting now for the approach of the USS Chosin, and as she approaches, we will have our minute of silence. You can see the Chosin appearing to my rear, silhouetted by a beautiful Hawaii day and Hawaii background. The Chosin is one of our newest Aegis cruisers. It has an anti-air capability. It has a land attack capability, an anti-ship capability, and anti-submarine warfare capability. This is an example of the multi-dimensional capabilities of our new ships of this day and age, in contrast to the 96 ships that were anchored in the harbor here 50 years ago this morning.
No, I can't see him.
Of silence will actually begin in just about a minute. The USS Chosin is moving forward, and the sounding of the ship's whistle, which we will hear, is unique to this ceremony. Ordinarily, it is the bosun's pipe, which you have heard so many times. It is the traditional way for a ship underway to honor those who died on the Arizona. But only on this occasion, which is a unique occasion, this 50th anniversary, will the ship's whistle sound the honor for those who fell at Pearl Harbor.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please bow your heads in a minute of silence? The 4 F-15 fighters from the Hawaii Air National Guard are now approaching the memorial from behind us.
This is the Missing Man flyover, which began at the end of World War II, the missing man signifying
When the
fallen
aircraft crossed
comrades.
the memorial, one member pulled up and away, leaving the rest to continue on in a missing man formation. This shows that their compatriots are gone, but not forgotten. Traditionally, any ship of the United States Navy that passes the USS Arizona renders honors. Members line the rails in formation, and on signal, their officers and section leaders render a salute. This morning, the USS Chosin, named for the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War, will render honors to this memorial in the memory of the American sailors and Marines who fought and died here. The USS Chosin is one of our newest Aegis cruisers, one of the newest ships in our Navy, and was just recently assigned to its home port here in Pearl Harbor. Each morning at precisely 0800 hours, the national colors are raised on ships at Navy bases around the world. And at 7:55 a.m. on December 7th, 1941, the band on the USS Nevada was preparing to play the national anthem for morning colors when the first torpedo planes flashed overhead. And sailors on many ships paused to run the colors up the masts on their way to battle stations. At this time, our national colors will be raised as the USS Chosin approaches. As she approaches our memorial, and she will render honors with us. At that time, the national anthem will be played by the United States Pacific Fleet Band, and it will be sung by Hawaii's Ambassador of Aloha, Mr. Danny Kalakini. Bugler, sound attention.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
National anthem performed by a very popular man in Hawaii, Danny Kalinkin.
Carry
He is
on.
known by the military he performs for
Ladies
them.
and gentlemen, please be seated. And you will also notice, ladies and gentlemen, as we return to the harbor, that all of the ships of the Navy will now be full-dress ship in honor of this commemoration. Around the sides of this memorial are many wreaths placed here by the President, the Secretary of Defense, and various military, veteran, and patriotic organizations. In memory of those who died here at Pearl Harbor and their comrades who have since passed on, President and Mrs. Bush will now move forward to drop flowers into the memorial well to my right, into the well and onto the ocean waves.
The President moving forward to honor the fallen at Pearl Harbor. Retired General Bernard Traynor. Bernie, this is a moment that strikes everyone in the military, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very emotional moment, I think, for all of us. You think of there's over 1,000 men still entombed in that ship.
The President and Mrs. Bush returning to their seats, the flag flying high on the mast, which is actually attached to the ship itself.
Leader of our Department of Defense, a man with the wisdom to look backwards for lessons and the foresight to look forward with solutions. In his time as Secretary of Defense, he has seen the world transformed as dramatically as after the Pearl Harbor attack. But this time, the change was brought on by our success. Success in deterring global conflict. Success in ending the Cold War. Success in rolling back Iraqi aggression and showing the world that America stands by its word. With these realities of the President in mind, he has created a vision of our armed forces for the future, a force to secure our interests and advance our ideals in a world of both uncertainty and opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Dick Cheney.
Thank you very much, Admiral Larson, President, Mrs. Bush, honored guests and friends. 50 years ago, this harbor was a map of America. Pennsylvania, the Maryland, the West Virginia, the Oklahoma, the Arizona, and more. The great array of ships was a mirror of the states themselves, calm, at rest, not suspecting we would soon be at war. The surprise attack that quiet Sunday morning broke the peace of that harbor and of the nation, and a new era in our history began. From that moment, there was no doubt that the United States was going to be the leader of the free world. The time to procrastinate was over. Isolationism was finished. We were at war for our lives and our freedom. No one else could fight for liberty on our behalf. The defenders of Oahu were taken by surprise, but those young enlisted men and officers, virtually all volunteers, fought back. Theirs was the spirit that sustained Valley Forge. Theirs was the spirit that stood the ground at Gettysburg, that prevailed at Belleau Woods. And theirs was the spirit that inspired Normandy and Iwo Jima, Incheon and Pork Chop Hill, Khe Sanh and Kuwait City. This service is a solemn occasion for all of us, but it is also a time of hope. A nation that is strong can face its failures. A nation that is wise learns from its lessons of the past. The defenders of Pearl Harbor taught us we must never take peace and security for granted. They reminded us we must sometimes fight for our freedom. They showed that even a few brave men and women can set a standard of courage for all time. Let me tell you about one of them. Captain Donald Ross was a junior warrant officer aboard the Nevada when the enemy struck at Pearl Harbor. As the senior engineer on board, he took charge of the effort to power the engines to get the ship underway. In less than an hour, an unparalleled feat, the Nevada was steaming down the channel. Don Ross passed out twice in the fires and the smoke, was twice resuscitated, and twice went back into action. He told no one that the blast of fire had blinded his vision. It was weeks before he was able to see again. In 1942, Donald Ross was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, one of 16 medals of honor awarded to the heroes of Pearl Harbor. Retired as a Navy captain in 1956, he's still involved in serving others, and he's still a champion of American ideals. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Donald Ross.
Captain Ross, of course, seated to the right of President Bush.
As a survivor of that attack on Pearl Harbor, it is a privilege to stand before you today as we honor our fallen comrades at arms, brave and gallant men who served their country with distinction, fell here at this place 50 years ago today. They will always be in our prayers. The American I'm about to introduce to you is also a survivor of World War II. While America was at war, George Bush, on his 18th birthday, enlisted in the United States Navy. George Bush received his wings and commission in that same year, thereby distinguishing himself as the youngest fighter pilot in the United States Navy at that time. Lieutenant Bush saw active duty from August in 42 through September in 1945. Flying torpedo bombers off the deck of the San Jacinto. As a result of his successful missions, Lieutenant Bush was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and 3 Air Medals. Shot down and adrift at sea, George Bush knows what we went through, and like us, he remembers. As he shipmates lost, but not forgotten. Let us know by that experienced tragedy of war, we shall always have to remember George Bush has devoted his life to the preservation of American values, and as our commander-in-chief, he is devoted and charged with the preservation of those values that as Americans we all hold so dear. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the President of our United States.
Thank you, Don. Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Keep that stitch over there. That's sweet. Thank you.
Captain Ross was on the crew of the Nevada, which received more medals for valor than any other crew, including
Please be
2 medals
seated.
of honor.
Thank you, Captain Ross. Thank you, sir. To our Secretary of Defense and our Chairman of our Joint Chiefs, members of our cabinet, distinguished governors here, and so many members of the United States Congress, Admiral Larson, members of our armed forces then and now, family and friends of the Arizona and Utah, fellow veterans, thank you very much for that introduction, Don, and thank you all for that welcome. It was a bright Sunday morning. Thousands of troops slept soundly in their bunks. Some who were awake looked out and savored the still and tranquil harbor. And on the stern of the USS Nevada, a brass band prepared to play the Star-Spangled Banner. On other ships, sailors readied for the 8 a.m. flag raising. And Ray Emery, who was on the Honolulu, read the morning newspaper. Aboard California, Yeoman Darrell Connor wrapped Christmas presents. On the West Virginia, a machinist mate looked at the photos just received from his wife, and they were of his 8-month-old son, whom he'd never seen. On the mainland, people listened to the football games on the radio, turned to songs like the Chattanooga Choo-Choo, comics like Terry and the Pirates, movies like Sergeant York. In New York, families went window shopping. Out west, it was late morning, many families still at church. At first, to the American sailors at Pearl, the hum of engines sounded routine. And why not? To them, the idea of war seemed palpable, but remote. And then, in one horrible instant, they froze in disbelief. The abstract threat was suddenly real. But these men did not panic. They raced to their stations, and some strapped pistols over pajamas and fought and died. And what lived was the shockwave that soon swept across America, forever immortalizing December 7th, 1941. Ask anyone who endured that awful Sunday. Each felt like the writer who observed, "Life is never again as it was before. Before anyone you love has died. Never so innocent, never so gentle, never so pliant to your will." Today we honor those who gave their lives at this place half a century ago. Their names were Birdie and Gomez and Doherty and Granger, and they came from Idaho and Mississippi, sweeping farmland of Ohio. And they were of all races and colors, native-born and foreign-born, and most of all, of course, they were Americans. Think of how it was for these heroes of the harbor, men who were also husbands, fathers, brothers, sons. Imagine the chaos. Imagine the chaos of guns and smoke, flaming water, and ghastly carnage. 2,403 Americans gave their lives. But in this haunting place, they live forever in our memory, reminding us gently, selflessly, like chimes in the distant night. Every 15 seconds, a drop of oil still rises from the Arizona and drifts to the surface. And as it spreads across the water, we recall the ancient poet. In our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart. And in our own despair, against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. With each drop, it is as though God himself were crying. He cries, as we do, for the living and the dead. Men like Commander Duncan Curry, firing a .45 at an attacking plane as tears streamed down his face. We remember machinist mate Robert Scott, who ran the air compressors powering the guns aboard California. And when the compartment flooded, the crew evacuated. Scott refused. "This is my station," he said. "I'm going to stay as long as the guns are going." And nearby, aboard New Orleans, the cruiser, Chaplain Forgy assured his troops it was all right to miss church that day. His words became legend. You can praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Captain Ross, right here, then a warrant officer, or was it a chief, was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his heroism aboard Nevada that day. I salute him, the other Congressional Medal winners with us today, wherever they may be also. For the defenders of Pearl, heroism came as naturally as breath. They reacted instinctively by rushing to their posts. They knew as well that our nation would be sustained by the nobility of its cause. So did Americans of Japanese ancestry, who came by the hundreds to give wounded Americans blood, and the thousands of their kinsmen all across America who took up arms for their country. Every American believed in the cause. The men I speak of would be embarrassed to be called heroes. Instead, they would tell you, probably with defiance, foes can sink American ships, but not the American spirit. They may kill us, but never the ideals that made us proud to serve. Talk to those who survived to fight another day. They would repeat the Navy hymn that Barbara and I sing every Sunday in that lovely little chapel up at Camp David. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm has bound the restless wave. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. Back in 1942, June of 42, I remember how Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, defined the American soldier and how that soldier should be, and I quote, brave without being brutal, self-confident without boasting, being part of an irresistible might without losing faith in individual liberty. The heroes of the harbor engraved that passage on every heart and soul. They fought for a world of peace, not war, where children's dreams speak more loudly than the brashest tyrant's guns. Because of them, this memorial lives to pass its lessons from one generation to the next, lessons as clear as this Pacific sky. One of Pearl Harbor's lessons is that together we could summon lightness against the dark. That was Dwight Eisenhower. Another, then when it comes to national defense, finishing second means finishing last. World War II also taught us that isolationism is a bankrupt notion. The world does not stop at our water's edge. And perhaps above all, that real peace, the peace that lasts, means the triumph of freedom, not merely the absence of war. And as we look down at, Barbara and I just did, at Arizona's sunken hull, tomb to more than 1,000 Americans, the beguiling calm comforts us, reminds us of the might of ideals that inspire boys to die as men. Everyone who aches at their sacrifice knows America must be forever vigilant. And Americans must always remember the brave and the innocent who gave their lives to keep us free. Each Memorial Day, not far from this spot, the heroes of Pearl Harbor are honored. Two lays are placed upon each grave by Hawaiian Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. We must never forget that it is for them, the future, that we must apply the lessons of the past. In Pearl Harbor's wake, we won the war, and thus the peace. In the Cold War that followed, Americans also shed their blood, but we used other means as well. for nearly half a century, patience, foresight, personal diplomacy helped America stand fast and firm for democracy. But we've never stood alone. Beside us stood nations committed to democracy and free markets and free expression and freedom of worship. Nations that include our former enemies, Germany, Italy, and Japan. This year, these same nations stood with us against aggression in the Persian Gulf. You know, the war in the Gulf was so different. Different enemy, different circumstances. The outcome, never in doubt. It was short. Thank God our casualties, mercifully few. But I ask you, veterans of Pearl Harbor, and all Americans who remember the unity of purpose that followed that momentous December day, 50 years ago, didn't we see that same strength of national spirit when we launched Desert Storm? The answer is a resounding yes. And once the war for Kuwait began, we pulled together. We were united, determined, and we were confident. And when it was over, we rejoiced in exactly the same way that we did in 1945. Heads high, proud, and grateful. And what a feeling. 50 years had passed, but let me tell you, the American spirit is as young and fresh as ever. This unity of purpose continues to inspire us in the cause of peace among nations. In their own way, amidst the bedlam and the anguish of that awful day, the men of Pearl Harbor served that noble cause, honored it. They knew the things worth living for, but also worth dying for. Principle, decency, fidelity, honor. And so look behind you at Battleship Row. Behind me, the gun turret still visible, the flag flying proudly from a truly blessed shrine. Look into your hearts and minds. You will see boys who this day became men and men who became heroes. Look at the water here, clear and quiet, bidding us to sum up and remember. One day, in what now seems another lifetime, it wrapped its arms around the finest sons any nation could ever have, and it carried them to a better world. May God bless them. And may God bless America, the most wondrous land on earth.
A remarkable moment. President Bush, himself a proud man, who often keeps his emotions concealed, this time clearly moved as he recalled the heroism of the men and women of Pearl Harbor who fought barely armed against an overwhelming enemy and who called for an America forever vigilant. Still ahead, the most solemn moment of this occasion, the rifle salute and the echo taps. The benediction will be by Rear Admiral White, the Chief Chaplain of the Navy.
Let us pray. God of grace and God of glory, our nation was founded by brave souls who declared their reliance on your divine providence and who pledged to each other lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Therefore, we give thanks for this land in which we live, the common heritage of freedoms we enjoy, and the uncommon valor and sacrifice that have preserved them for us. And now, O God, as we conclude this most solemn occasion, grant to us and our nation wisdom of mind, courage of heart, and strength of arm, that we may acquit ourselves with honor, that our nation shall endure as the hallmark of freedom and government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. This we pray in your name. Amen. Will the guests please and echo taps. Guests, please be seated.
We will be back in just one moment.
We'll recover much more quickly to use Pearl Harbor as a staging base for the battles of Coral Sea, Midway, and on down the road. But more to the point, they did not get the carriers, and those were the vital ships that provide the spearhead for the fight back.
Yamamoto knew, the admiral who was the Japanese strategist for Pearl Harbor, that they could inflict great damage here, but he did not believe that they could go on to win the war in the Pacific.
Well, the idea was to have a negotiated settlement, that the Japanese would prevail for perhaps a year to a year and a half, and hoping that the United States would sue for peace. He knew that this was a powerful industrial nation and could have the ultimate capacity to win it. What he didn't count on was the extent to which the American people would be united in their desire for revenge.
And what about you, Ensign Miller? Did you think, for example, that the United States would come under even more attacks from Japan as a result of what happened here that day? Did you think it would just go on for hours on end?
There was a later attack after the early morning attack, but from the very first attack, our attitude was one of let's fight back, let's repair the damage we have, let's proceed ahead. I think the earlier description of the memorial with the low point leading on to the high points for recovery and victory is very realistic.
All right, thank you very much, Captain Miller and Paul Stillwell, for being with us. I talked with one of the survivors yesterday who was over here in Fort Allen firing effectively a 30-06 at the Japanese planes as they flew by. That tells you how primitive the anti-aircraft provisions were at that time. And he said they were forced to drink the chlorinated pool water for several days because there was a feeling that the island Japanese may have poisoned the island's water supply. That turned out not to be the case, of course. Thank you both for being with us. We'll be back with more from Pearl Harbor right after this.
Norelco doesn't just shave you close, but incredibly close. Or merely shave you in comfort, but in exceptional comfort. Because the Norelco razor's patented lift and cut system lifts the hair, so when it's cut, it can actually drop below skin level without the blades even touching your face. And once you've shaved that incredibly close with exceptional comfort, you know you'll always be comfortable shaving with a Norelco. Norelco, we make close comfortable.
Layoffs, recession, pollution.
Daycare, not having any time.
job and security.
You never needed it more. A new extra-strength pain reliever made to get today's tough headaches before they really get you. 1,000 milligrams, stomach guard, and the name Bayer. That should ease your mind. Introducing new extra-strength Bayer Plus. Now there's no pain you can't bear.
Thank you.
We're back at Pearl Harbor for some closing thoughts. My new friend, Captain Miller, received the Navy Cross here when he was on duty 50 years ago. That's the second highest Navy commendation. There was so much heroism here that day that not all of it, obviously, could go rewarded. But think of the men who were here that day, and the women as well, those survivors and what they have lived through. They came out of the Depression years. They were born, most of them, during the Roaring 20s, survived the Depression, fought and won World War II, gave America prosperity the likes of which the world had never seen before. They went from conventional power to atomic power. They saw the space age introduced as well. Television did not exist in 1941. Some say the world may be better off for that as well. But the fact of the matter is that these people who survived this day that lives on in infamy, these people have lived through history that could span several centuries, but it was all compressed in one lifetime for them. And for those who did not survive this day, those who received the Purple Heart posthumously, they had the words of FDR for their families as he wrote to each of them who lost a husband or a brother or a son. In grateful memory, he said, he stands in the unbroken line of patriots who have dared to die that freedom might live and grow and increase its blessings. Freedom lives, FDR said, and through it he lives in a way that humbles the undertakings of most men, the men of the Arizona and the other men who died here 50 years ago. Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, a nation remembers. I'm Tom Brokaw for NBC News.
John Larroquette wants one special victory.
A warning. It seemed underhanded. The fact that the country would be attacked was one thing. That it was without warning seemed to make it even worse.
Remember Pearl Harbor. The idea of sneak attack, the idea of never again, has become part of the American psyche, a driving force with a life of its own. As some nations fear invasion, the United States fears surprise. Sneak attack. That legacy of December 7th, 1941, has shaped America's defense policy ever since.
No matter how much we try, no matter how much isolationist talk we have, and no matter how many times we persuade other nations that we'll never fight, we are going to have to, particularly if we aren't prepared. So the lesson really of Pearl Harbor is to stay ready for war, and then you very likely will not need to go to war.
Mr. Roosevelt believed that final victory could bring a realistic and enduring peace.
As the World War ended and the Cold War began, U.S. defense planners looked toward the Soviets with suspicion and mistrust.
On display in Moscow, the wreckage of pilot Francis Power's U-2 reconnaissance plane for Muscovites and foreign newsmen to see as the Soviet launches its most belligerent anti-American propaganda barrage in recent years.
Then on October 7th, 1957, the U.S. and the rest of the world were greeted by the sounds of Sputnik 1.
The technological breakthrough of the Soviet satellite orbiting Earth caused a firestorm of worry among Americans. Prudent military planners never give up the high ground, and an orbiting satellite is the highest ground of all. The space race with the Russians was on. Sneak attack. The paranoia of Pearl Harbor was felt around the edges of another U.S. crisis. 1962. Soviet missiles going into Cuba. With a flight time of only minutes, there would be no time for defense. And over this issue, the world very nearly went to war again.
We are asking tonight that an emergency meeting of the Security Council be convoked without delay to take action against this latest Soviet threat to world peace.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Sneak attack. The idea of putting a man on the moon was romantic and caught Americans' imagination as never before.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But the effort was driven as much by the notion of not surrendering advantage to the Soviets as it was by dreams of conquering new frontiers. Even today, what happened at Pearl Harbor helps set the agenda for the future of U.S. defense. Star Wars technology is designed to provide an umbrella shield against a surprise attack by incoming ICBMs. Orbiting the Earth on a 24-hour basis is a multi-billion-dollar collection of intelligence satellites, all to give advance warning to keep the U.S. free from surprise.
Small clouds on the horizon turn into major wars. And when that happens, you have to be ready. If you're not ready, then your consequences are really too frightful even to calculate.
The tragedy of December 7th, 1941 still lingers. As we move toward the turn of the century, U.S. defense is still tied to a lesson from the past. A lesson learned at a small island in a big sea, at a place that will long be remembered, Pearl Harbor. Hello, I'm Bob Kane. Remember Pearl Harbor. Half a century later, that wartime slogan still rings shrill, Pearl Harbor. It was a defining event in American history, one moment in time, one searing act of violence that changed a nation's way of life. In 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii was just a distant outpost of a reluctant world power. There was a war in Europe, but that was for Europeans. The Japanese were fighting in China, but that was half a world away. And the world was a very big place until Pearl Harbor. A sneak attack on a Sunday morning that brought America into war. And to this day echoes the warning to never relax, always be vigilant, to never let this happen again. (1941) Conflict and distrust among nations. Hitler has overrun most of Europe. Great Britain is being pounded from the air by the Nazis. The Japanese are expanding attacks in China and seized the capital of Vietnam. And the Germans, Japanese, and Italians have signed the Tripartite Pact, assuring each other of mutual defense. Everywhere, it seems, national borders are being threatened, the rule of law ignored. But if war is coming America's way, it's not yet in the backyard. There are bathing beauties on the beach at Coney Island. DiMaggio still rules the Yankees. Citizen Kane is in the theaters as the nation seeks escape through Hollywood's magic. There is sentiment in the States to help the British and the French, short of sending men to fight. About that issue, the country is truly divided. There is often bitter debate. The isolationists, led in part by Charles Lindbergh, argue that America should go it alone in the world.
We believe that the security of our country lies in the strength and character of our own people, and not in fighting foreign wars.
But America is not standing still while those wars rage on. President Roosevelt believes deeply that Hitler has to be stopped. Production lines are built. A civilian draft is passed. Roosevelt skirts neutrality and helps rearm the British and French. But he feels he can't enter the war openly without complete support at home. This he does not have. Roosevelt's plan in the Pacific is simple and direct. Stop Japanese expansionism and protect American possessions. When the Japanese moved against Indochina in 1940, the president immediately embargoed steel shipments, cutting off their supply. In late summer 1941, he cuts off the flow of oil, sending the Japanese economy into a tailspin. Japan is faced with two choices: back down or take by force the resources it needs. The Japanese pursued diplomatic negotiations throughout the fall of 1941. But the decision has already been made by Japanese military rulers with the agreement of the emperor. The plan developed by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is put into motion. At the end of November, a task force of Japanese aircraft carriers moves north into the Pacific. War is only days away. The Americans and British are aware that something is up. One of their most closely guarded secrets is that they have broken some Japanese codes. Operating independently and with little collaboration, each country is reading secret diplomatic and sometimes military messages from Japan to its envoys and fleets. One message, in a code Americans call Purple, asks spies in Hawaii to report the specific locations of warships at Pearl Harbor. A second message, decoded December 6th, says that Japan intends to break diplomatic relations. Word of this circulates among top officials in Washington, but no urgent messages go to the commanders at Pearl Harbor. Instead, Washington sends a telegram by Western Union. Meanwhile, the Japanese task force has been given the go-ahead for the attack. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who will lead the first attack, and the other pilots are given a final briefing. Early in the morning of December 7th, their planes are readied. They take off into a stormy sky.
This is beautiful.
How much? Pulsar?
Pulsar.
Pulsar por este. I think he wants your watch.
But honey, you gave me this watch.
Money. How much money? Pulsar también? Sí, Pulsar. Pulsar por esta. What, is he kidding?
No.
Some things in life are worth far more than they cost.
No thank you.
Pulsar. There's no time like it.
Nice job.
I think they're cushy.
Fluffy, like a baby bunny.
Cozy, comfy, snuggly. My feet have never been happier.
Totes presents Totes Toasties.
For men.
Toasties have treads for gripping and a plush warm lining for just relaxing around the house.
I like your red toasties, Bill, but blue look better with your eyes.
Get out of here.
Totes Toasties.
For men.
They say clothes make the man.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no.
They're only half right.
No.
Canoe, men's cologne. It's one fashion that outlives the fads.
Yeah.
Imagine election coverage that offered straight talk on candidates, their voting records, their stand on issues. This year, don't imagine. Watch Campaign USA 92, only on CNN.
Lights, camera, action. The holiday movie season has begun. We'll have a preview.
We're going to jail, aren't I?
And the inside story of last year's...
When it comes to education, only one use program designed specifically for use in schools earns overwhelming support from teaching associations, parents working with schools, and key academic administrators. In fact, leading educators across America endorse the one TV program teaching children about the real world, CNN Newsroom. Find out how cable is working in America's classrooms. Call 1-800-344-6219.
CNN Special Reports continues in a moment with the Pearl Harbor attack and the controversy over whether it was truly a surprise.
We built this business. They came in with their big pumps and stopped the flooding. Saved my business. All I've worked for. Built this business.
Our people really cared. It meant a lot to us.
They lent me the money. Without it, Debbie couldn't have started college.
We built this business to build your dreams.
Okay, where am I? Wow, that looks like a paradise to be discovered just by me. I bet that's Tahiti.
No.
Nope, no, I didn't think it was, really. It looks like the outback to me. Yeah, down under. There's great snorkeling. This has got to be Australia, mate. No, oh, it's Mediterranean. It's Greece, isn't it?
No, where the new world meets the old world, discover the new old world. Puerto Rico.
Is it Puerto Rico, by any chance?
Multiply the pleasure of watching TV with Rabbit Magic. The Gemini Rabbit Wireless VCR Multiplier lets you watch movies on any TV in your home with only one VCR. All you need is the Rabbit, and it sets up in minutes without tools. Just connect the Rabbit transmitter to your VCR and send pictures and sound to any TV in your home without wires. And use the Rabbit with your camcorder for babysitting or security. A great gift at only $59.99. The Rabbit VCR Multiplier.
This is beautiful.
How much?
Pulsar?
Pulsar.
I think he wants your watch.
Some things in life are worth far more than they cost.
No, thank you.
Pulsar. There's no time like it.
Introducing PowerBook from Apple. It will let you run MS-DOS software. It will let you run Macintosh software. It will let you run away.
At 7:49 Sunday morning, Commander Fuchida signals his pilots, tow, tow, tow. The order to attack. The first of two waves of fighters and bombers begin their descent toward the unsuspecting island. The Japanese planes approach Oahu from the north. Coming in at varying levels, the planes sweep over cane and pineapple plantations toward Hickam and Wheeler airfields and Battleship Row. Some bombers fly around the island, coming into the harbor from the south. The second attack wave comes about an hour later from the northeast, facing the Ko'olau mountain range. Dive bombers spot Pearl Harbor as if through a gun sight as they fly through two passes in the cliffs. 7:55 a.m. Ships are at rest in the harbor on this peaceful Sunday morning when the attackers strike. Hickam and Wheeler fields are hit by dive bombers. 33 planes are wiped out at Ford Island in the first minute. The first torpedo planes hit Battleship Row. The signal tower announces, "Air raid Pearl Harbor. This is no drill." American forces are not on alert. Ammo boxes are locked. Men frantically bust them open with hammers and axes. Desperate and determined, Americans begin firing back. Japanese Commander Fuchida is elated. He radios "Tora, Tora, Tora" to his fleet off Hawaii, signaling success of the surprise attack. Torpedo planes continue their raid, coming practically on the decks to launch torpedoes. They hit the outboard ships first. The Arizona takes several torpedoes. Then a high-level bomber penetrates the ship with an armor-piercing bomb, blowing up the forward magazines.
I was looking right at it, and it just kind of settled down in the water, and it seemed like every deck in it came out, and you could see the black, real red-black smoke, you know, and the fire. And through the fire and smoke, you could see sailors just going through the air like rag dolls.
I could see that the whole forward part of the ship was aflame, that there were a number of injured and badly burned men lying on deck.
Over 1,000 men die in that ship. Smoke from the Arizona hides the Nevada. The Japanese fly on to other targets. The Tennessee is on fire, so they hit the Maryland. The Utah, mistaken for a carrier, is hit by 2 torpedoes and capsized. The Shaw erupts in a tremendous explosion as a torpedo hits near the forward magazines. Of 8 battleships present in the harbor, all are damaged or sunk. At least 5 torpedoes hit the Oklahoma, and she rolls over in the mud, men trapped inside. Casualties are phenomenal.
I just walked out to the hall, and I looked down, and there was one litter after the other with moaning, groaning people, casualties. And so what I did was give morphine for the pain and use pressure bandages, bandage up the wounds as best I could. There were so many casualties, and I can't begin to tell you how many deaths I saw that day, just myself.
The American losses are devastating. 2,403 killed, 68 of them civilian. 1,178 wounded. 8 ships sunk or beached, 13 damaged. 188 aircraft destroyed, another 159 damaged. Of over 350 Japanese planes participating in the attack, only 29 are downed. The Japanese also lose 5 midget submarines. Not all of those who died are killed in the attack. 3 bodies are recovered from the West Virginia when she is pulled into dry dock in 1942 for repairs. They're found in a pump room along with chalk markings that showed the men had lived until the day before Christmas Eve, waiting for the rescue that never came.
Attention all former military personnel. If you are between the ages of 30 and 69 and you served in any branch of the armed forces, you are now eligible to apply for term life insurance at the guaranteed rate of just $1 a week. That's right, just $1 a week. With money often tight, it can be tough to get the extra life insurance you need. That's exactly why this affordable $1-a-week term life plan was developed by Veterans Life to help you get what you need at a price you can afford. And it's exclusively for veterans and spouses ages 30 to 69. Whether you serve during wartime, peacetime, active, or reserves, you can apply for term life protection for just $1 a week. Just pick up your phone and call this toll-free number now. Free information will be rushed to you by Western Union. Imagine life insurance you can afford with valuable features like a $1-a-week rate, first day coverage, and benefits that never go down. You will also get news about our Veterans Double Bonus, a discount eye care plan for you and your family, plus our Veterans Newsletter series filled with VA news, benefit updates, and more. Both your eye care plan and your subscription to Veterans Update are free with your term life protection.
Veterans, call 1-800-235-3600 for your free information package. That's 1.
On December 8, 1941, America woke up to a changed world. The shock of the attack, the lives lost, the damage, all had brought the United States face to face with its future. No longer was there a question whether to fight the Axis powers. No longer raised voices saying this war belonged to other nations, other men. Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and the United States now spoke with one voice to the rest of the world. But even then, as the nation rallied, there were questions. How did the Japanese accomplish this audacious attack? How was America caught so completely off guard? Who was responsible for this enormous failure? There were darker questions, too. Was it possible that some in the U.S. government actually wanted the Japanese to attack?
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live
But confidence in the armed forces had been shaken. Why had the attack been such a surprise to the commanders at Pearl Harbor? Why were the Army and Navy not on alert? Within days came the cry from Congress, who's responsible? In the aftermath, Navy Secretary Frank Knox flies to Pearl Harbor to question the men in charge. Admiral Husband Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet, and Army Lieutenant General Walter Short. Knox privately reports to Roosevelt that there was plenty of blame to go around, including blame for those in charge in Washington. 2 weeks after the attack, under mounting pressure, President Roosevelt forms a commission to investigate, headed by Supreme Court Justice Owen Roberts. It is the Roberts Commission which prepares the first public report on the disaster.
In the course of my law practice over the years, I have never seen a more systematic, unfair treatment of an individual than the government gave a worthy officer in the person of Admiral Kimmel.
The Roberts Commission squarely places the blame for the lack of readiness at Pearl Harbor on Admiral Kimmel and General Short. The pair, the commission says, had failed to properly evaluate the seriousness of the situation. These errors of judgment were the effective causes for the success of the attack.
There was a systematic effort to deprive him of the normal benefits of the Bill of Rights, due process of law. He was pilloried unjustly by the Roberts Commission on a record which was inaccurate, on the basis of unrecorded testimony, deprived of counsel during that proceeding, never able to read its record until 3 years later.
Accused of dereliction of duty, Kimmel and Short are relieved of command, reduced in rank, and publicly hung out to dry.
They really made Kimmel and Short scapegoats. That's what happened.
But the Roberts Commission may be unaware of evidence, some say ignored or concealed evidence, that the U.S. had broken the Japanese codes and that Washington knew that the attack was coming.
A, they were trying to completely cover up that we were breaking the Japanese code. And B, there was much concern about the public's confidence in the government.
It was politically expedient for the Roosevelt administration to heap all the sins on these two people, Short and Kimmel, to suggest that the fault lies out there in Hawaii, not with us in Washington. In fact, there was a lot of blame, more than enough to go around.
How much did Washington know? Months prior to the war, U.S. intelligence had broken a Japanese diplomatic code called Purple. Among the intercepts in September 1941 was a request for the Japanese consulate in Hawaii to map out Pearl Harbor, noting the specific locations of the U.S. warships. Called the bomb plot message, it was a clear indication that the Japanese were putting together plans for an attack. But Kimmel and Short were never told about the bomb plot message.
Had Hawaii, Admiral Kimmel and his intelligence officer, Commander Layton, had an opportunity to read those intercepts, at least Layton claimed the outcome would have been different. And he used a telling phrase. He said, the snake in your backyard hisses the loudest, meaning that to those on the spot, the bomb plot message dividing the harbor up into zones would have been a lot more compelling than it was to those in Washington.
Nor were Kimmel and Short told about the so-called WINS message. in which the Japanese, using a metaphor about the east wind, warned their diplomats that Japan was about to sever diplomatic relations with the United States. Finally, on December 6th, Navy intelligence intercepted the Japanese ultimatum, an ultimatum the Japanese government had instructed be delivered to the U.S. State Department at 1 p.m. Washington time, or 7:30 a.m. in Honolulu. This time, Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall did send a warning, the Western Union telegram.
The messenger was on his bicycle going to headquarters when the attack hit. He was brave. He jumped in a ditch, took cover, then got up and rode on Fort Shafter and delivered the message about an hour after the attack.
We needed one thing, which our own resources could not make available to us. That vital need was the information available in Washington from the intercepted dispatches, which told when and where Japan would probably strike. I did not get this information.
In all, there were 9 investigations of the Pearl Harbor debacle. All but the Roberts Commission cleared General Short and Admiral Kimmel of the charges of dereliction of duty. But the Navy and the Army have never officially restored their previous ranks, never said that they weren't solely responsible. Today, Kimmel's sons say their father's reputation has suffered because the government is afraid of opening a Pandora's box.
If not Admiral Kimmel and General Short, who? Who? And the trail from them leads on up. It leads up through the military, and it leads into the White House.
Don't give up if you've been turned down for Social Security disability benefits. Fight back with Ward White & Associates, a team of experts with over 50 years experience, including 35 years with the Social Security Administration. Ward White & Associates knows how the system works. For free consultation, call us now. Remember, there is no fee unless we win. Ward White & Associates.
Daytona, Ormond, New Smyrna. Call 761-2122.
At Gold and Silver Jeweler in Daytona Mall, no matter what age, you'll never outgrow your love of fine jewelry. Rings, chains, charms, earrings, bracelets, 10-carat, 14-carat, rose and tricolor gold, CZs, affordable wedding sets, and pink ice, all at Gold and Silver Jeweler. Free ring sizing, too, plus while you wait, expert jewelry repair. Also, see our huge selection of sterling silver. Next door, visit Village Cards and Gifts, Daytona's hidden treasure place of gifts. Both great stores centrally located in Daytona Mall by Daytona 6 Theaters.
This is CNN.
Pearl Harbor, 50 years after, will continue in a moment.
For years, I never even thought about it. Guess I just didn't want to face things. Yeah, I've been there. But now, my parents, they need real help. It's gonna be tight. We'll just have to manage somehow.
I got this guy at Payne Weber. Put me in a mutual fund for my parents. The same time he set up my kid's college fund.
That long ago? How do you know about your parents back then?
He asked.
$24 a day across Europe, Asia, and America. 70,000 of the best people on the ground are working to bring you the best service in the sky.
Delta, we love to fly and it shows.
Konica knows to keep a business running smoothly, you need teamwork, timing, and communication. You can't afford to miss a beat.
I'm missing page 2.
Your systems
No problem.
need to be efficient as well as simple, fast, and affordable.
Hello? We've lost some music.
Like Konica fax machines. They deliver on the spot to keep your business performing. When overnight just won't do, Konica Facsimile saves the day.
This week on James Bond Wednesday, 007 faces Spectre in a deadly game of hide and seek. James Bond Wednesday continues with Thunderball. 8:05 Eastern this Wednesday on TBS.
Roosevelt was assured that there could be no successful attack on Pearl Harbor. In my research, I am convinced that he did know. He did know they were coming. But he took a calculated risk, and something that presidents have to do all the time.
Historian John Toland insists Roosevelt was misinformed about the size of the Japanese fleet, did not realize what the cost would be.
He was assured that let them come and start the attack, one bomb drop, and we wipe them out, no Americans killed.
If Roosevelt had known, he would have warned the fleet. If the Japanese had been mounting an attack, that itself would have been enough for going to war against them. He didn't have to let the fleet be annihilated.
Roosevelt, says Naval Institute historian Paul Stilwell, may have been out of the loop, not told by his admirals and generals about key Japanese intercepts.
Sometimes the information was withheld even from President Roosevelt. The mentality then was that this is such an important source of intelligence that we've got to keep the distribution of the information as limited as possible so we don't compromise it, don't let the Japanese know what we're doing.
As the Japanese Navy was sailing across the Pacific toward Pearl Harbor, across the Atlantic, Prime Minister Winston Churchill was trying to draw the United States into the war against Germany. Working for the British from a listening post in Singapore, Australian codebreaker Eric Nave had broken the Japanese naval code JN-25. According to researcher James Rusbridger, Nave's intercepts were rushed directly to Churchill.
Wherever he went, the messages went. And these last collection of messages, of which there are about 6, which were from Yamamoto in Tokyo to his task force telling them to sail. The first one actually said the second phase of hostilities will commence on November the 21st. Everything after that was so crucial that in Singapore, where the messages were being initially decoded, they were looking for these messages. They sent them straight back to London on a direct line teletype.
But Rusbridger claims Churchill kept the messages to himself, refusing to warn Roosevelt.
I lay the deaths of the United States service personnel entirely at Churchill's door, because if he had trusted Roosevelt and told him the truth, Roosevelt would have immediately warned his 2 commanders in Hawaii, General Short and Admiral Kimmel, and they would have laid a trap for the Japanese and decimated Yamamoto's forces at an extremely vulnerable point, 3,500 miles out of the Pacific, probably sunk a couple of their aircraft carriers. Then the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway need never have been fought at all, and the whole turn of events in the Pacific would have been very different. But Churchill wasn't going to take that risk. He wanted the attack to be so cataclysmic that it would shock America into the war in a way that it would never turn back.
A thing that makes one skeptical about any conspiracy theory is the number of people that would have had to have been involved and kept silence ever since then. And no person has really come forward with that kind of evidence. Eric Nave has said that they broke JN-25, but there's no smoking gun, to use a term from Watergate, that directly links Churchill, and certainly not Roosevelt, with specific intercepts or knowledge from that code breaking.
Despite the efforts of Rusbridger and others, The British government has refused to release any files related to Pearl Harbor or Japanese code breaking, citing the threat to national security. Many historians believe it is highly unlikely that any documents will ever be released.
Conica knows to keep a business running smoothly, you need teamwork, timing, and communication. You can't afford to miss a beat.
I'm missing page 2.
Your systems
No problem.
need to be efficient as well as simple, fast, and affordable.
Hello? We've lost some music.
Like Conica fax machines. They deliver on the spot to keep your business performing. When overnight just won't do, Conica facsimile saves the day.
Service to more cities across the Atlantic than any other U.S. airline, Delta now makes it easier than ever for the people of America to get to know the people of Europe.
Buongiorno.
Bonjour.
Via.
Guten Tag.
Ritzy. Delta. We love to fly and it shows.
Здравствуйте. Ford Motor Company. Profiles in quality. Teamwork.
We work good as a team here on a job like this, where all 4 of us can work together. That's what I said in '82. And today, teamwork is more important than ever.
Our paint job is only as good as a primer coat.
My primer coat's only as good as the body prep.
My body prep starts with a quality body panel. Together,
our goal is to build the highest quality cars and trucks in the world.
At Ford, quality is job 1.
Where is that? Oh, it's gorgeous. Nice beaches. It's tropical. I think I will guess Hawaii.
Whoa.
No. Oh, look at this vast open rockiness. Oh, it's green. It's gorgeous. Look at that. It's a man's vacation. It's Scotland. Scotland. No. Nightlife. Monaco. Oh, don't say no. No.
Where the new world meets the old world, discover the new old world.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Oh, I should have known.
As battles go, Pearl Harbor was not the biggest ever fought. 15 times as many men were lost at Gettysburg as died December 7th. It wasn't a long battle. The bombs and gunfire were silent by noon that Sunday morning. But what we can say about Pearl Harbor is the sneak attack by the Japanese cut deeply at America's self-image. The consequences came quickly, the issues black and white. The Japanese had struck one of the world's most powerful forces with no warning, and their mission was a great success. Surprised Americans called it unfair, and the cry for revenge spread across the country. In a fiery instant, the Japanese had become the enemy.
Oriental paradise, I hear you calling.
In the travelogues, just 5 years before Pearl Harbor, this is how America viewed Japan. A tranquil land where nature is worshipped.
A beautiful illustration of the character of the Japanese people.
Where life is governed by an ancient code of honor.
The manly art of self-defense, which is characteristically Japanese. Typical Japanese music is so unlike that of the Western Hemisphere that it is difficult for us to understand and appreciate it.
A country steeped in history and art. Rich in diversity.
In all the world, there is no country more tolerant of religious belief than Japan.
The old and the new, side by side. Graceful sampans and hulking ocean liners.
Carrying great cargoes and messages of goodwill from the east to the west.
But all that would abruptly change. The government and mass media responded to the raid on Pearl Harbor with an attack of their own. a bombardment of propaganda.
Emperor Hirohito leads the LYBs, the little yellow bellies who claim the rising sun for their own.
The Japanese were portrayed in a much more vicious manner in the way in which the Germans were portrayed.
First, let's examine a typical Japanese soldier. His average height is 5 feet 3 inches.
From the beginning, the media attacks on the Japanese played to racial fears. Time magazine illustrated its coverage of Pearl Harbor with a drawing of Admiral Yamamoto, the yellow peril personified. Inside that issue, how to tell America's Japanese enemies from its Chinese friends. Although it says there is no infallible way of telling them apart, Japanese, except for wrestlers, are seldom fat. They often dry up and grow lean as they age. Most Chinese avoid horn-rimmed spectacles. The Chinese facial expression is likely to be more placid, kindly, open. The Japanese more positive, dogmatic, arrogant.
You're a sap, Mr. Jap, Mr. Jap.
Racial stereotypes were everywhere.
Why, I never seen a Jap that wasn't yellow.
While the cartoons used slapstick to poke fun at the Americans, the more frequent buffoons were the Japanese, nearsighted, with buck teeth.
So sorry.
When the good guy wins, single-handedly beating a Japanese sub, the yellow dust rising from the wreckage is a reminder that they are different from us. There were also images of sexual violence, a tried and true method to stir emotions.
Clearly, it drew on one of its most fundamental assumptions that the war was a war to protect women and children.
Hollywood often emphasized a high moral underpinning for the United States, in contrast to what was commonly viewed as Japanese treachery. In this scene from Destination Tokyo, an American sailor rescuing a Japanese pilot is literally stabbed in the back.
That's enough, kid.
His funeral at sea reflects the American view that fighting the war was a divine mission.
We the living pray thee, Heavenly Father, to grant him eternal peace and rest through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Years later,
The Japanese were often portrayed as being less than human, with frequent comparisons to animals.
The mad Japanese dog strikes in the Pacific.
Here, one for you, monkey face. The oily fingers of the brown octopus stretched out across the Pacific to strangle free men.
Then one day, I was just about to have another glass of pineapple juice, and those little yellow monkeys sneaked in again.
Defeating this nation is as necessary as shooting down a mad dog in your neighborhood.
The Japanese were often portrayed as a people. In other words, when a gorilla or a monkey or a rat was used to depict the Japanese in a vicious way, it was the Japanese. The most vicious images of the Germans tended to focus not on Germans, but on Nazis.
As the war in the Pacific neared its final stages, the intensity of the propaganda on both sides also built to a crescendo. In each country, the enemy was seen as inherently evil, a faceless mass.
He and his brother soldiers are as much alike as photographic prints off the same negative.
Where even children pose a danger.
As iron ore is melted in furnaces to remove impurities, so in Japan, humanitarian impurities are burned out of the child. As the steel is shaped by beating and hammering, so is the boy hammered and beaten into the shape of the fanatic samurai.
The war was portrayed as a race war on both sides of the Pacific. The Americans publicized battlefield atrocities like the Bataan Death March.
In the daytime, they marched in the sun. Thousands dropped out and were bayoneted and shot.
The Japanese publicized incidents of Allied soldiers mutilating the Japanese war dead. The Americans denounced the Japanese for slaughtering civilians. The Japanese denounced the Americans for the incendiary bombing of Tokyo and dozens of other cities. On both sides of the battle, propaganda reflected the fury of the conflict. But it may also have triggered a deadly cycle. As each side intensified its war of words, the image of the enemy grew stronger, the battle more brutal, the chance of peace more fleeting. A deadly cycle that was broken only by the deadliest use of force.
Ford Motor Company. Profiles in quality. Pride.
When you get pride, you get quality.
That's what I said back in '81.
And today we still have that same pride.
And from what we hear, a lot of people think we're doing a pretty good job.
You can hear the quality.
You can see the quality.
You can feel the quality in the way it handles.
Thanks.
That's what happens at Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln when quality is job one.
If your VCR is a pain to program, then get rid of it and get the one from RCA with VCR Plus built in. To record a show, just look for the VCR Plus code in your TV listing. Then punch it in. It's as simple as that. So if you've had it with your old VCR, get rid of it and get the easy-to-use RCA VCR with VCR Plus built in.
Sarah, keep an eye on your brother.
No matter what size your business, no matter what size the job, Konica copiers are ready. Konica, capturing the imagination.
Remember Pearl Harbor. For the United States today, it is a warning, a solemn promise, a phrase taught in school about an event that happened long ago. But for the men and women who were there on December 7th, 1941, it is so much more. For them, there are the memories, stories of bravery, stories of pain, and stories of their lives and their youth. Pearl Harbor. And their world was changed forever. Before the war, Hawaii was just another lovely chain of islands in the Pacific. Blooming colors and liquid rocks. Few came to Hawaii. Travel here was often 5 days by boat. Quiet, exotic. Before the war, Hawaiian life had a measured cadence. The rhythm is different now. Everywhere, signs of change. It is still home to the Pacific Fleet. Pearl Harbor has been rebuilt. Tourists crowd the beaches, lured by Hawaii's warm breezes and fiery sunsets. And drawn here still by the memories. Battleship Arizona, sunk at its moorings with great loss of life. Today, a memorial to those who fought here and died.
This sort of a thing could happen again. It could be in a different place. It could be at a different time. It could be at a different enemy opposition. But regardless of when or where, we must never allow ourselves to be caught off guard again.
Visitors look into the depths and wonder at the gallantry, the sacrifice that took place here many years before.
I've never discussed it, not even with my son. My husband and I never discussed it. But I have thought about it very, very many times. And I've looked back to that day and wondered, how did I get through that day? How did I take care of those people? How did I do all of that?
This was a sneak attack, and we had no warning of it, and they were bombing and killing people and we were not yet at war. So my feeling was one of, initially certainly, of anger.
It can't happen. It can't happen to us. And how? How did they get here? We were supposed to be invulnerable, sitting out there in the middle of nowhere. That far away from Japan? Impossible. But it happened.
I could see the ship was on fire. Men were jumping off the burning ship into the burning oil in the harbor. They were just trapped. They either burned on the ship or they burned in the water.
I feel awful sorry for the guys that didn't make it. And I get kind of torn up. A good buddy of mine, I seen him 2 days before he was killed. He was to come back and see his two little twin girls he'd never seen. And I was single like a bag. So it sort of bothers me. But that's war, and there's no glory in it.
The most pathetic of the casualties, and the one that will always remain in my mind, is this young boy that was seriously injured. He said to me, "Nurse," he said, "I'm only 17 years old, and I just graduated from high school, and I have my graduation ring on." And he said, "Would you please take it off?" He didn't say remove, he said, "Take it off. And would you see that my parents get it?" And here I am leaning over, and I could feel the tears just rolling down my face. And I mean, this was just the beginning for me. But this was the casualty that I shall never forget. I just wonder how I ever lived through just that one day, because it was nothing but blood and dying. And this awful feeling in the side, in the pit of your stomach, that you should do more, but you couldn't do more.
Decades have passed since Pearl Harbor was caught in a blinding sneak attack. In that time, enemies have become allies, their futures intertwined. Together now in peace, hallowed peace. With this, we consecrate those fallen soldiers. Remember Pearl Harbor.